There are three words people say right before they stop thinking. It's common sense. Hi, I'm Alan Stafford. I've spent 30 years in marketing and persuasion studying how people get moved and how they get manipulated. And this channel, Think Sharper, exists for one reason, and that's to give you the tools to tell the difference. And today what we're going to do is break down why common sense is one of the most effective manipulation tactics in everyday life, and why your gut feeling, as reliable as it feels, is often working against you in exactly the situations that matter most. All right, I want you to picture a moment you've probably been in several times. You're sitting with someone, maybe at dinner, maybe at work, and you push back on something they just said. I mean, you ask a question, right? Okay, you want to understand the reasoning, and they look at you and maybe a little frustrated, and they say, "It's just common sense." And the conversation stops. Because what do you do with that? I mean, the moment something gets labeled obvious, any question you ask becomes evidence that something is wrong with you, not with the idea. That's not a debate, my friend. That's a trap. See, common sense is a conversation ender dressed up as a conclusion. And here are two things that feel like common sense as examples. First one, if you're angry, let it out. Punch a pillow, scream it off, vent to a friend. You'll feel better. Makes sense, right? Release the pressure. That's how it works. Except research says the opposite. See, studies consistently show that venting anger doesn't discharge it, it amplifies it. You don't feel better, you feel more, well, fired up. The pressure doesn't release, it just escalates. And the second one, innocent people don't confess to crimes they didn't commit. That one is obvious. Why would you? Except documented false confessions from real cases with real people who went to real prison happen far more often than most people expect, and for a whole range of reasons that have nothing to do with physical torture. See, both of these felt like common sense. Both of them, well, they were wrong. So, what is common sense? And why does it feel so reliable when it's often so wrong? See, your brain runs on two modes, okay? Mode one is the autopilot. It's fast, automatic pattern matching, known as System 1 thinking often. It handles most of your day without you even noticing, recognizing faces, for example, reading emotions, navigating familiar routes, making thousands of micro decisions before your conscious mind even wakes up. And mode two, well, mode two, often referred to as System 2 thinking, is the analyst. It's slow, it's deliberate. It kicks in when you need to actually think something through. When the autopilot hits a wall and says, "Hey, I don't know. I don't know this. You handle this one, okay?" See, common sense is almost entirely the autopilot operating without supervision. And here's what makes that dangerous. You see, the autopilot is brilliant inside a narrow lane. It's great at familiar situations, low-stakes decisions, well-worn territory. For example, it's like driving a familiar route to work every morning. Sometimes you arrive to work and didn't even realize you were there that quick. See, you didn't even notice the route. But the moment you're in unfamiliar territory, complex systems or high-stakes environments, the autopilot is still running and it genuinely doesn't know the difference. See, there's a concept in behavioral science called what you see is all there is. And it describes something the autopilot does that most people never notice. It builds a complete, confident story using only the information you currently have and then ignores everything it doesn't know. So you don't feel like you're missing information. You feel like you have a full picture of everything. And that's not insight, my friend. That's the brain filling in the gaps and calling it obvious. Now let's look at three specific ways common sense gets people into trouble, okay? Because it's not random. I mean, there's a pattern here. So when you call something common sense, what you're actually saying is, this is consistent with what I have personally observed in the environments I have personally lived, filtered through what I personally believe. So it's not universal truth, it's your autobiography, okay? Someone who grew up in a different city, a different economic environment, a different family structure, their common sense is different, well, from yours. And neither one of you is wrong based on experience, but both of you can be very wrong about the facts. See, experience is real. Experience is valuable, but experience isn't data, and it's not evidence. It's just a sample. This is where it stops being, well, just a thinking error and becomes a manipulation tactic. Think about this for a second. If you appeal to common sense in the middle of a disagreement, that means you don't agree, okay? Which means it's not actually common. The two of us having an argument is proof that at least one of us doesn't share that sense. So what is common sense really saying in that moment? If you disagree with me, there's something wrong with you. It's not an argument, it's actually an accusation. And it has a long history of being used to dismiss questions that deserve real answers. Common sense once said that the earth was the center of the universe. Common sense said you could identify a witch. Common sense said bleeding was medicine. See, every generation has a body of belief it considers self-evident, and most of them don't survive contact with evidence. One of the most consistent findings in decision research is this, okay? People's confidence in their judgment is reliably higher than the accuracy of those judgments. Let me say that again. People's confidence in their own judgment is reliably higher than the accuracy of those judgments. We are structurally overconfident, not occasionally, structurally. And the gut feeling doesn't signal its own uncertainty, it just presents firmly. So when you feel like something is obvious, that feeling of obviousness is not a quality check. It's not telling you this has been verified. It's telling you this is consistent with my existing model. And those are two very different things, my friend. Now, I want to be clear about something because this is where people sometimes overcorrect, okay? The goal is not to distrust everything your gut tells you. That would be exhausting and, well, counterproductive. Intuition built on deep experience in a specific domain is genuinely valuable. For example, a veteran negotiator reading a room, a surgeon who has been or who has seen that pattern 1,000 times, a parent who knows something is off before they can articulate it. Gut feelings in familiar, well-practiced, low-stakes situations, hey, they're reliable. Use them. The problem is when we apply that gut confidence to situations that are actually unfamiliar, complex, or high stakes, and we don't realize we've made that switch. So here's a simple check. 3 questions. Whenever you hear yourself or someone else invoking common sense, ask these questions. Question 1, is this situation actually familiar to me or just a familiar feeling? See, there's a difference between I've been in this before and this reminds me of something. The brain treats them the same way, unfortunately. They're not the same thing, though. Question 2, could someone with a completely different background reasonably see this differently? If yes, that's not common sense. It's your sense, and that's worth knowing. And question 3, am I calling this obvious because of evidence or because, well, questioning it feels uncomfortable? Sometimes obvious is correct, but when you trace it back and find that obvious really means I don't want to examine this, well, that's the tell. See, here's what I've noticed after 3 decades watching how people make decisions and how they get manipulated through those decisions. The people who invoke common sense most confidently are often the furthest from it. Not because they're not smart, but because confidence and accuracy aren't the same instrument, and familiarity isn't the same as truth. See, common sense at its worst is a wall people build to keep questions out. And real thinking is the willingness to go back and check the wall. Not every feeling is wrong, not every gut reaction is a trap. But when someone tells you that something is obvious, including yourself, the single most powerful thing you could do is pause and ask, obvious based on what? Because once you stop accepting obvious at face value, once you start tracing where the certainty actually comes from, you stop being steerable, you start being intellectually sovereign. And if this kind of thinking is useful to you, if you want to keep, building the habit of catching these patterns before they catch you, hit subscribe. That's what this channel is built for. See, every video is one more tool that can help you get to that next one. I want to thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And don't forget, think sharper and stay sovereign, my friend.